The ballroom fell silent when the woman in the pale pink dress grabbed the waitress by the front of her uniform and yanked it hard enough to tear the fabric. Crystal chandeliers glittered above them in the bright afternoon light, hundreds of guests stared in disbelief, and the waitress stood frozen, trying desperately to hold herself together. Nobody knew that the quiet young woman being humiliated in front of the city's richest people had walked into that mansion carrying a secret worth billions. And nobody knew that the man standing only a few steps away was about to discover that the woman everyone had dismissed as just a waitress was the one person who could change everything. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their appearance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder about compassion, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. The story began on a bright Saturday afternoon at the magnificent Belmont estate, where sunlight poured through enormous glass windows and reflected across polished marble floors. The mansion had been decorated for the annual Belmont Foundation Charity Gala, an event attended by business leaders, celebrities, politicians, and wealthy families from across the country. Among the hundreds of employees working quietly behind the scenes was a young woman named Mira Ellison, 27 years old, with brown hair tied neatly into a bun and a calm expression that hid years of hardship. Mira was wearing a simple white service shirt, a navy apron, and a small name badge. She had accepted the temporary catering job because she needed money to help support her younger brother, who was studying at university. Mira had learned long ago that people often decided who you were before you ever had the chance to speak. She had grown up believing that dignity had nothing to do with expensive clothes, impressive cars, or the size of someone's bank account. Her grandmother had taught her that a person's true wealth was measured by what they did when nobody was watching. Those words had stayed with Mira throughout every difficult year of her life. She had worked several jobs, studied late at night, and quietly built something nobody at the gala knew about. Across the ballroom stood Adrian Vale, the 34-year-old CEO of Vale Meridian Group. He was known for being disciplined, intelligent, and extremely private. Newspapers often described him as one of the youngest billionaires in the country, but very few people knew much about his personal life. Beside him was his girlfriend, Celeste Harrington, a glamorous woman from a wealthy family who was accustomed to being treated like royalty. Celeste had spent most of the afternoon complaining about the staff, the decorations, and anything that failed to meet her expectations. Mira had been instructed to deliver a tray of refreshments to the VIP section when Celeste suddenly stepped backward and bumped into her. One glass tilted, and a small amount of juice spilled onto the floor. Mira immediately apologized and reached for a cloth, but Celeste's expression hardened. She looked at Mira's uniform as though it represented everything she disliked about the room. Instead of accepting the apology, Celeste loudly accused Mira of being careless. Several guests turned toward them. Mira tried to explain that the spill had happened when Celeste moved backward, but Celeste refused to listen. Her anger grew when Mira calmly offered to clean the floor herself. Celeste demanded that she leave the room immediately. Mira lowered her eyes and tried to step away, hoping the embarrassing moment would end. But Celeste reached toward the front of Mira's uniform and pulled at the fabric. The shirt tore at the seam, leaving Mira shocked and humiliated. A wave of whispers spread across the ballroom. Some guests raised their phones before event staff quickly asked them to put them away. For a moment, Mira simply stood there. Her face had gone pale, but she refused to cry. She carefully pulled the torn fabric together and took a breath. She had experienced difficult moments before, but she had never expected to be publicly treated this way. Then Adrian stepped forward. His expression was no longer calm. He looked at Celeste, then at Mira, and finally at the torn uniform. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Celeste expected Adrian to defend her, as he had done many times before. Instead, Adrian asked the event manager why a guest had been allowed to treat an employee that way. The manager nervously explained that Mira was only a temporary server and that Celeste was an important guest. Adrian's expression changed immediately. He said that being wealthy did not give anyone permission to humiliate another human being. But before the situation could go further, Mira quietly told Adrian that she did not want an argument. She simply wanted to finish her work and leave. Her voice was steady, but her eyes revealed how deeply the incident had affected her. Adrian asked her why she was working there if she seemed uncomfortable around the wealthy guests. Mira gave a small smile and said that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of. She then turned toward the service corridor. That should have been the end of it. But Adrian noticed something unusual. As Mira walked away, a small silver keycard slipped from the pocket of her apron and fell onto the floor. Adrian picked it up and looked at the name printed across it. Mira Ellison, principal shareholder, Ellison Horizon Holdings. Adrian stared at the card. The name was impossible to ignore. Ellison Horizon Holdings was one of the largest privately controlled investment companies in the country. It had quietly acquired stakes in technology firms, real estate projects, renewable energy companies, and international businesses. Most people knew the company, but almost nobody had ever seen its principal shareholder. Adrian suddenly remembered a confidential business document he had received months earlier. The document had mentioned that Ellison Horizon Holdings was preparing to invest several $billion into a new infrastructure project. The identity of the controlling shareholder had never been publicly revealed. He looked toward the service corridor. Mira was gone. Adrian immediately followed her. He found her in a quiet hallway near the staff entrance, sitting on a small bench and trying to repair the torn seam of her uniform. The bright afternoon sunlight came through a nearby window, illuminating the quiet corridor. Mira looked exhausted rather than angry. Adrian apologized for what had happened. Mira told him that an apology from him could not erase the humiliation, but she appreciated that he had finally spoken up. She then explained that she had not come to the gala as a wealthy investor. She had come because her company had anonymously sponsored the foundation for several years, and she wanted to see whether the organization genuinely helped people or simply displayed charity for publicity. Adrian was stunned. Mira explained that Ellison Horizon Holdings belonged to her family, but she had deliberately kept her identity private. She wanted to know how employees and ordinary people were treated when nobody knew they had money or influence. The truth hit Adrian harder than he expected. He realized that the person everyone had dismissed as an insignificant worker had been observing the entire organization. More importantly, she had been treated exactly the way she feared ordinary people might be treated. Celeste eventually came searching for Adrian. When she entered the corridor and saw Mira standing beside him, she laughed nervously and accused Mira of trying to create trouble. Then Adrian held up the keycard. Celeste's expression changed. Adrian calmly explained that Mira Ellison was not simply an employee. She was the principal shareholder of the company whose investment could determine whether several major businesses survived or failed. The news spread through the ballroom within minutes. The same people who had ignored Mira earlier suddenly wanted to speak with her. Executives approached with nervous smiles. Guests who had previously looked away now tried to apologize. The event manager became visibly uncomfortable. Mira watched them quietly. She could have embarrassed them in return. She could have demanded that everyone who had ignored her be removed. Instead, she asked Adrian to gather the staff together. When everyone assembled, Mira stood before them and spoke about dignity. She said that wealth should never determine whether someone deserved respect. She explained that the reason she had hidden her identity was simple: she wanted to understand how people behaved when they thought there was nothing to gain. Then she announced that Ellison Horizon Holdings would continue supporting the foundation, but only under one condition. The organization would establish a new program providing scholarships and emergency assistance to hospitality workers and their families. The room became quiet. Mira said she had known what it felt like to choose between paying a bill and buying groceries. She had known what it felt like to work long hours while pretending everything was fine. She did not want anyone else to feel invisible simply because they wore a uniform. Adrian listened carefully. For the first time, he understood that Myra's greatest strength was not her fortune. It was the fact that she had experienced hardship without allowing it to make her cruel. Celeste was eventually escorted away from the event after refusing to apologize sincerely. Adrian later ended their relationship, realizing that status and appearance meant very little when compassion was absent. But Mira did not walk away from the gala as a billionaire seeking revenge. She walked away as the same woman who had arrived that morning. The difference was that people had finally seen what had been there all along. Weeks later, the new scholarship program officially opened. Mira personally visited the first training center and met young workers who dreamed of building better futures for their families. She remembered her grandmother's words and realized that perhaps true wealth was never about possessing more. It was about having enough power to make someone else's life a little easier. Adrian also changed. He introduced new employee policies across his companies, created anonymous reporting systems for workplace mistreatment, and made one principle central to every leadership meeting: every person deserved respect, regardless of their position. Months after the gala, Mira returned to Belmont Estate for another charity event. This time she arrived openly as the principal shareholder of Ellison Horizon Holdings. Yet when she entered the building, she still greeted the servers first. One young employee nervously asked her why she continued treating everyone so kindly after what had happened. Mira smiled and answered that she remembered what it felt like when nobody knew her name. And that was the lesson everyone in the room carried home that day. Never measure a person's worth by their clothes. Never assume someone's position tells you their story. And never underestimate the quiet person standing in the corner, because sometimes the person you overlook is carrying more courage, wisdom, and kindness than everyone else combined. If this story touched your heart, please support the video with a like, share it with someone who believes kindness matters, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales for more stories about courage, compassion, and second chances. Before the story ends, comment, "Kindness always wins," if you believe every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And perhaps that is the most important lesson Mira left behind: you never know who is standing in front of you, but you always know how you are choosing to treat them.